Hello and welcome to the 25th video in this series, Programming a Test Engine in JavaScript and eventually a GUI. I've got a small apology to make. I made the mistake yet again of not checking the code quickly in the browser. I've added into main.js the generate moves function here, even though we're not generating any moves yet, just to check the code, and I found a few typos and errors in movegen.js. I'm sure you'd already seen them yourselves. I missed off the S in pieces a couple of times, but the most glaring one of all is this square off board here, which I completely forgot to add into defs.js during the last video. And essentially that is a function which simply does what it says on the tin, is checks whether the square we're looking at is off the board or not, using the files board array as a test here, returning true or false. So I'm sorry about that, and little error there, not copied and pasted it in, but otherwise everything seemed relatively okay. So in this video we're going to carry on with the move generation. I've removed the code that had in the end of the white or black, where we set the piece to a white knight or a black knight. I've removed that code now from the end of those sections, which where it was here. And I've also, in preparation for what's coming up, added in some more variable definitions at the top here. So make sure that your variable definitions look the same as the variable definitions here. So we're going to start building up our move generation for non-sliding pieces. And because we're working independent of side here, what we essentially need to do, I'm going to scroll this right down here, is we need to do something like, we need to get our piece for the side, so get piece for our side. So say we are working with side white, we want to generate moves now for the white knight and the white king, because they're the two non-sliding pieces. So we need some way of, depending on what side is to move, of having the white knight and white king, or the black knight and black king. And then what we need is we need to be able to loop all directions for the piece. So we need to know the number of directions for a given piece. So what this means is, it means we're going to set up a few arrays. So in defs.js we've already got our arrays here assigned for the various pieces in terms of their directions, but now we need to build on this slightly a little bit, and we need to build in some more arrays. And the first one we're going to build in is going to be called dirnum, and it's going to be an array which says, indexed by piece type, how many directions that piece can move in. So we have 8 for the knight, 4 bishop, 4 for rook, 8 for queen, 8 for king, and then we've got 0 again because we're not bothering with the pawn, because we're using this just for the normal pieces. And then we have our 8, our 4, our 4, our 8, and our 8. So that sets up our direction numbers according to indexed by our piece type. The next thing we need by piece type, indexed by piece type, is to be able to reference the array that that piece will use as its directions array. We use this one to get the number of directions, but now we need to be able to reference the correct directions array. So again, empty and pawns, we're not going to do anything. So the knight will be the knight direction, then we have the bishop direction, then we have the rook direction, and we have the king direction for the queen, remember, because the queen's the same, it just slides, and king direction for the king. Then naught for the black pawn, and I'm just going to save a little bit of time, just copy and paste that across here like so. So now we have an array that we can use that, if we want to get the directions, loop through the directions array for a piece, let's say a white knight, we would loop through the piece directions for white knight, and then the first direction would be at naught, and the second one would be then at a direction of 1, etc. So we would actually access this piece directions array then like this. Sorry, not piece dir there, to get us then the -8, the -19, and so on. So that's how we'll be using our piece directions array. The only other tricky thing we've then got is to know to get our piece depending on the side. So we know now that we can reference, and we know that from the piece we can get how many directions it moves, and from the piece directions array here we can use this double array syntax with the two square brackets alongside each other then to loop through all the directions for that piece type. But now we need to get the piece type according to side. So we'll call it loop and non-slide piece. I'll call it piece for short. And now what we'll do is we'll say for white we've got the white knight. Oh, sorry, that should be pieces.white knight and pieces.white king. And then we'll put the 0, and I'll explain why. And then we'll put pieces.black knight and pieces.black king. And now what we can do is we can say, okay, if its side to move is white, we'll start at index 0 in this array to get the piece, and keep looping to get the next piece whilst our value inside this array is non-zero. And if we're black, we'll start at index 3, index 2, indeed 3, 0, 1, 2 and 3, and keep looping until we get a 0. So all we need now is another array to give us the index. So we'll call this loop non-slide index, and this will now be indexed by side. So white starts at index 0 and black starts at index 3, like so. So just to reiterate that, when we start our move generation, just so that's absolutely clear what we'll do, we'll get our first, just for non-sliding pieces, we'll set our piece index to start with equal to our loop non-slide index, and let's say its side to move is white, which will give us a value of 0. We'll then set our piece equal to our loop non-slide piece of our piece index, which remember is 0. And this will give us then the white knight. What we'll then do is we'll increase our piece index by 1. And now what we can do is we can loop with the piece directions of the white knight, and we loop then from 0 to 8 because we use our directions number array to find out how many directions there are for the white knight. And then when we finish this, we then get our next piece, because piece index is now 1, which will then be the white king, and do exactly the same thing. And then our next piece would be a 0, and we would then break out of the loop, because we'll be doing all of this as while piece is not equal to 0. So a bit of pseudocode just to explain how that works. Okay, so in the next video, because I've taken already a bit too long on this video, we'll actually go about using these arrays and implementing that code. One thing I'm going to do just before I stop is I'm just going to, you can't see it on the screen, just run the browser, yes, and everything is running without errors, because I'm a bit scared of that now. So next video we'll start actually implementing the arrays that we've been looking at here. So thanks very much for watching. Comments, questions, criticisms, welcome as always on YouTube.